Welcome back to Second Breakfast and our ongoing fantasy discussions, bringing you the best thoughts, theories, and literary analysis this side of Flea Bottom.
In this episode, we're discussing The Hedge Knight, which is the first of George R.R. Martin's 3 Dunk and Egg novellas. Not Dunk and Egg, as I thought for many years, but Dunk and Egg. And it's also the source material for Season 1 of HBO's A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. So let's get into it.
Okay, so here we are back in the wide world of Westeros, continuing our jaunt through our Mount Rushmore of fantasy icons. In the past few weeks, we have talked about the most recent Witcher novel, Crossroads of Ravens. We did a 3-part, chapter-by-chapter, kind of deep dive discussion of that novel. Over on the Patreon, we just revisited the entire Hobbit trilogy. We marathoned the entire thing back to back to back, accompanied by a 7-course feast that Maggie assembled.
It was very fun.
And we have all sorts of new thoughts on The Hobbit over there on Patreon. And to complete the trifecta, we're coming back to George R.R. Martin. This discussion will be covering the entirety of The Hedge Knight, that first novella. This is coming out on Friday. The show starts on Sunday. It's all about scheduling.
Yes. Speaking of scheduling, I think this is a good time to announce. We've kind of been soft launching this, but we're returning back to fantasy in a more official way. We started out as a fantasy show. We started out doing chapter by chapter Lord of the Rings, The Witcher, Game of Thrones. And we took a step back from that for a while to sort of just take a break and rethink and have time to talk about more things. But now we're back, baby. So you can keep an eye out for us. Every 2 weeks, our Friday episode is going to be a fantasy episode. We are really dedicating and leaning into fantasy. We're going to still have, on off Fridays, we'll have other episodes, and we'll also have lots of occasional Tuesdays and other days of the week as well. But every 2 weeks on Friday, come here for Fantasy Friday. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so next time, 2 weeks from today, we will be talking about Season 1 of Game of Thrones. When we finished a Game of Thrones last, I think it was like April, we were like, yeah, we'll watch the new season, we'll watch the season and talk about it on Patreon eventually. And it's been eventually, and it hasn't happened. And
it's been a year.
And we decided, let's just talk about it here on the regular feed.
Yeah.
So next week, in 2 weeks from today, we are going to be talking about the adaptation of A Game of Thrones, Season 1 of the show, and it's going to be a lot of fun, so do get excited for that.
So to reiterate, new episodes every Friday, every other episode is fantasy.
Yes,
okay,
yes.
So let's jump into The Hedge Knight. Usually when we do episodes on an entire literary work, we don't do a recap because it's a lot of stuff to recap.
Right.
See our Dune coverage where I'm not going to summarize 1,300 pages for you. Dive in.
Can you imagine? That would be insane.
No, I can't imagine. But because this is a novella and because the show is coming out, and I know a lot of people are interested in the story but maybe haven't run out and bought the collection yet, I wanted to do just a cursory recap here. I wrote out a big long one, and then for your listening pleasure, I spent even more time cutting it down into something a little more thrifty. Okay, so here is the bird's eye view of what happens in George R.R. Martin's The Hedge Knight.
Spoilers, obviously, in case you didn't get that.
Ideally, there are spoilers.
Important to flag that at the top.
So we open with a guy named Dunk. He's about 17. He's very tall. He's got floppy hair. He's an oaf in the best possible way. Incredibly charming. He is on the way to compete in a tournament with an old man. He's a squire to this old man who is this wandering hedge knight. The old man, the weather turns, he's sickly, the old man dies, very sad.
R.I.P.
So Dunk buries him, and we see the gravesite. It's genuinely upsetting.
Yeah, it's very, very beautiful and very George R.R. Martin to start with death.
But very quickly, the gods drop a squire upon Dunk. So Dunk used to be a squire. Now the old man is dead. He's moving up the chain. He's now the hedge knight. So he needs a squire. And this little bald Charlie Brown 8-year-old comes out of nowhere and volunteers to be his squire. So Dunk reluctantly, kind of uneasily says, yeah, okay, deal with the horses. So we show up to I'm speeding ahead.
Yes.
During the tournament, there are some Targaryen princes and sons of princes, and being Targaryens in power, they're shitheads. This is 100 years before Game of Thrones, so full Targaryen power tripping with the purple eyes and the hair and the whole thing.
Dragons have already died out, but Targaryens are still very much in power.
They're on their way to dying out.
Yes.
And one of the Targaryens basically cheats. There's this guy who's really promising during the first couple rounds of the joust, and one of the shithead Targaryens, he aims his lance instead of at the guy's helmet or shield or any sort of tactical place where you're supposed to aim the fucking lance. He aims it at the guy's horse and beheads and
right in the neck.
Kills the horse.
It's gross.
It's terrible. And so the guy gets his leg crushed, and it's just cheating. So Dunk makes some friends. He's watching for the first few days before he throws his name in. He wants to get some people out of the way, be a little tactical, because he's got shitty armor and he's got no money, and he's just trying to be smart about it. So he makes some friends and takes in the lay of the land. Egg runs up to him while he's having wine with these Fossaways, this kind of minor house that he's made friends with. And Egg runs up and says, hey, this girl that you were chatting up who works at the puppet tent that we walked by, she's being attacked by one of the shitty Targaryens.
Oops.
So Dunk runs over and defends her honor. And he punches the Targaryen and he ends up fighting him a bit. The Targaryen, of course, being of the royal blood, has the Kingsguard and a royal guard. So they all grab Dunk, and the Targaryen, he just jumps into Targaryen mode. Said, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to knock out your teeth. I'm going to torture you. And Dunk is saved by Egg. So little Charlie Brown Egg rolls up. He's bald. He pulls down his hood, and he announces that he is truly Aegon Targaryen. He's
sense.
one of the little Targaryens running around this tournament who they've misplaced. Shaved his head. His brother is kind of a coward, and he was trying to do his own thing, so he wanted to be a squire. So he found Dunk, who needed a squire, and he signed right up. So he steps in to save Dunk's life. Dunk is still arrested and thrown in prison. Egg shows up to try to apologize for being shitty and lying to him, and ultimately Dunk is offered trial by combat. But it's an olden times version of trial by combat, so it's a little different. It's called the Trial of Seven. So 7 gods, the old gods, although Winterfell shit with the 7 gods and, the mother and the father and the warrior, and we remember those from Game of Thrones.
Sure.
Basically, it has to be 7v7. So 6 knights will volunteer with Dunk, 6 knights will volunteer with the shithead Targaryen. And then everyone who came to watch the jousting and the tourney, they're going to watch this trial by combat instead.
They get a bonus event in the tournament. It's very exciting.
It's a new spectacle. But Dunk doesn't have many friends.
No.
Some of those minor house, the Fossaways that he befriended, some of them join up, and then Egg, feeling guilty for basically causing this, he runs off and says, I'm going to find some friends and some noble lords and knights, and I'll help you fill out your ranks.
Because the other thing is that if he doesn't get all 7, that's sort of like that means that the gods know that you're guilty. So you don't even get a chance to fight if you don't get 6 other champions to fight with you.
And of course, the shithead Targaryen has the Kingsguard filling out his ranks.
So he's all set.
Dunk is, he's also incredibly young and inexperienced, and he knows that. So he's at a major disadvantage. So he basically looks at the crowd of all of these assembled noble lords who came to watch this tournament, and he makes his appeal for knights. He says, are there no true knights among you who will defend me for this honorable, virtuous principle, for being wrongly accused by this shithead Targaryen.
For protecting the innocent, for protecting the young girl. Yeah.
And so he's got all these Targaryens and the Kingsguard on the other side. Obviously, Charlie Brown's not fighting. He's 8. But he's trying to help Dunk the best he can. So one knight answers this call when Dunk has appealed for true knights in this court. And the one person who rides out and says, yes, I see your call for virtue and I will answer it. And it's a Targaryen.
Dun, dun,
this is Prince Baelor, who is the heir to the throne right now.
Yes.
He's big shit, as big as shit can be. That was better than I was hoping. I didn't really know where that sentence was going to land,
it's
but
fine.
I'm happy with
you
that.
You just got to roll with it. It's fine.
And I believe he's the father?
Uncle
of the shithead Targaryen who caused this fucking problem and massacred that horse.
And also Egg's uncle.
Exactly.
Because Egg and the shithead are friends, are brothers.
So the trial of the 7 begins. Dunk kind of fails his way through it.
Yeah, it's difficult. He doesn't, Dunk is big and strong and skilled, but he's still very young and green and has never really been in a fight like this. So he still really doesn't know what he's doing.
He's full of potential.
Right.
But he gets totally obliterated during the joust.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of melee ground to ground hand-to-hand combat that the fight devolves into. Dunk survives. He uses the shield from a lovely armorer who's helped his cause, and he kind of beats the Targaryen shithead until he yields. But during this fight, a lot of those lesser house nobles who have come to Dunk's aid. A lot of them are brutalized and eventually die of their wounds. Some of the Kingsguard are wounded. And as this thing wraps up and everyone, goes to the hospital tent to lick their wounds,
Hospital tent.
Prince Baelor kind of shambles over and says, like, oh, we did it. You're a good guy. We need more good guys in the realm. And a couple guys come over to help him remove his armor. And as the heir to the throne has his helmet removed, half of his skull falls out.
It's nasty.
And he dies.
And his brain is coming out. Yeah, it's brutal.
He's obliterated. It's very
so sad.
It's very, spoilers for Breaking Bad, it's very Gus Fring.
Yes.
Where
Face
half
off.
of his head falls off. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So Dunk technically wins, but he's also now forever going to be known as the guy who indirectly led to the death of the heir to the throne, who was very clearly a good guy. So Dunk feels guilty of, hey, this guy saw my appeal and did the right thing, but fuck, if I had just let them kill me,
or
we would have
taken my
had,
hand or something.
Yeah, then we would have had a really good guy in line to run the Seven Kingdoms.
Right,
so
right.
there's it's a very bittersweet kind of melancholy that we close on. And one of the surviving Targaryens who's not a shithead, who was the brother of Prince Baelor, who's now dead. I think his name is Maekor.
That's yes. Yeah, it's the shitheads and Egg's father.
Yeah.
Maekor.
So he comes over and says, hey, you did a good thing, bad situation, got out of hand. What if you came and became a knight at my castle, and I see you've got a nice dynamic with Egg. Maybe he can be your squire as you work at my castle. And Dunk says, thanks for the offer. It's all I've ever wanted, but no, not at all. So instead, they strike a bargain, and Dunk is being very tactical in the way he presents this information. He basically says, hey, you know that shithead Targaryen who caused this entire mess? I bet he'd never talked to a commoner before he talked to me, and that caused all this shit. So maybe if Egg is in this line of succession, maybe it would do him good to see a little bit of the world, to interact with some other people, some diversity in his life and his experience. So he says, how about I do accept Egg as my squire, but I just keep being a hedge knight, a wandering knight, living up to his vow and principle, wandering through the Seven Kingdoms. And the Targaryen says yes. And the story ends with Dunk and Egg wandering off into the Seven Kingdoms for what seems to be a whole world full of adventures.
Yeah, wonderful summary. Thank you very much for putting that together. Before we dive into our discussion, listener, this is a good time to remind you about our Patreon. Kim mentioned it earlier. Our latest Patreon episode, we talked about our Hobbit Marathon Feast, which was really fun. But the Patreon is a fun place to be if you want to dive into the show even more. It's $2 a month. We release 2 new bonus episodes every single month over on the Patreon. By joining, you can, of course, access those as well as the previously released episodes we've been releasing for years and years. We talk about fantasy. Most relevant to this is we did chapter by chapter of Fire and Blood, which is the source material for House of the Dragon. We have a lot of other fun stuff over there, so do check it out if you're interested. But thank you, Cam, for summarizing that story.
Sure.
I loved reading this book, or this not novella, I have to say.
Yeah, so we have some theories and literary analysis and some kind of deep dive analysis. But before we get to that, I just want to spend a second on impressions.
Yeah.
Because this is the first George R. R. Martin thing you and I have ever read that isn't Game of Thrones.
I know. Yeah. Well, Fire and Blood, but still. Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
But even that's so different because Fire and Blood is, we've talked so much about it. It's narrative, but it's not a narrative story.
Right,
it's a history.
Right.
It's a falsified, fictional history.
So,
and it reads very differently from something like this.
And I think the expectations are different here because it's such a smaller scale, not just in the word count, but also because it doesn't have a million warring families.
No.
It doesn't have dragons.
No.
It doesn't have aerial combat and all that crazy shit.
There's only one POV character, and it's Dunk.
It's ultimately a different type of fantasy.
Yes.
This is almost, in my notes, I was calling it like Ren Fair fantasy.
Yes, because it is interesting because it, on the one hand, didn't feel like A Song of Ice and Fire at all because it felt so classic and hopeful and... it wasn't sunshine rainbows fantasy. It wasn't cozy fantasy by any means. It was brutal and there was scary stuff and real stuff happening, but it felt so heroic to me. But at the same time, it did feel like A Song of Ice and Fire because you've got George's great writing. You've got all these families and things that you recognize. You've got, themes of death that we open and close on. We've got the deaths of major characters who you think are going to be important, and then it turns out they just have to die because that's the brutal way of the world. You've got evil, shitty Targaryens. And so it's like a new flavor of Game of Thrones that I was so excited to get to sample.
It really did hit that impossible sweet spot of being fresh and familiar. What did you think of these two new leads?
Oh my gosh, I love Dunk so much. Because again, he's so unlike anybody I've read in George's stories before. He feels familiar to me in the way that, like in classic fantasy, where he's young guy, has potential, but doesn't know what he's doing, is not very sure of himself, but we know he can be great and he wants to be great, But he also wasn't, boring or cookie cutter either. I thought he was,
Or stupid.
No, he wasn't stupid. And it's so sad because the whole time he keeps calling himself stupid. But you see him go through incredible optimism and hope and confidence down into complete self-doubt and total self-hatred and just thinking he's the dumbest, loneliest, lamest idiot who's ever lived. But then you see him think, no, I can do this. I can kill this prince right now. Like, you see him go through those different feelings throughout the story. So, I mean, I loved Dunk. I thought he was such a nice, he's not a commoner per se. He is a knight, but he was born in Flea Bottom. So he comes from nothing. And we talked about this in our Game of Thrones discussions. We never get the POV from somebody who's not of noble birth. Like it's always royalty or nobility in Game of Thrones.
Or Theon.
Yeah, or Theon. But he's from,
Speaking of shitheads.
He's from a great house. Like,
right.
we never get a regular person. And as a knight, you're a member of the nobility, but just barely in Dunk's case.
Right.
So I liked getting that different perspective too. That was refreshing.
He reminds me of so many of my favorite meat and potatoes, non-magical, non-faded Game of Thrones characters. The ones who really become the beating heart of these stories.
Like Jon.
Like Jon, sure. I mean, Jon is sort of Prince was Promised and all that other shit.
Well, sure. He is very faded and prophetic in that way.
I'm thinking of someone like Davos Seaworth.
Yeah, okay.
Or maybe someone like Gendry.
Yeah.
Someone who is not special in that fantasy way, but for that has such a level head, such a core of principle that makes them kind of a bedrock, reliable, lovable, endearing character the whole way through, that grounds some of the freewheeling Targaryens and crazy Lannisters and silly Starks. So I really love Dunk as a lead here. And Egg is so much fun because that big reveal of him actually being a Targaryen, I mean, I know it's a wonderful kind of pulling the cloak back and unveiling himself, but you know it way before it happens.
Yeah, you know it immediately. Yeah.
And that's intentional. I think that's part of the charm, is that if Dunk is kind of stupid in this story, it's just that he doesn't see that reveal coming. But I think George R. R. Martin really wants us to. I think he's enjoying that the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, the second we meet Egg, number one, you're like, Egg, that's weird, egg on. But then also, like, his eyes are described as being almost purple, and you're like, oh, well, okay, I get it.
And we've literally done this before.
Yeah.
I've got some echoes I'm going to talk about later from our other fantasy stories, but if you remember, when Jon becomes friends with the Maester on the Wall, in the first book and the first season, he eventually finds out he's a Targaryen.
Right, that's true.
Because
so we've done this before.
Yeah, he goes by a slightly different name.
It's Maester Aemon, yeah.
Right,
Aemon
so
Targaryen.
we're used to that.
That's
and
true.
I think that is familiar in a nice way. It never feels redundant. So yeah, I love this new scale. I love this new type of fantasy. I love these new leads. Briefly, I want to look at, there are other novellas in this series. What are you hoping for there? What are your expectations now that you know what this sub-series feels like?
I guess I'm wondering what they're going to do that this one hasn't already done, in that it's giving us a different look at the world. It's giving us a new perspective, a new time period to explore and play with. But, I mean, I guess we'll see, I hope to see Dunk and Egg obviously grow in their friendship, but more importantly, grow in who they're becoming. I think Dunk will get smarter and cleverer and more skilled, and maybe achieve some of the goals that he sort of explains that he wants to achieve at the beginning of this story. I also wonder if we'll get more complexity with Egg, and it's not just that he's a good Targaryen, but like, what does that mean for like when he grows up? Like, I'm not saying the story needs to go that far, but I wonder if we'll get more hints in that way, and maybe some more ties to the regular A Song of Ice and Fire story. I mean, we can only do so much because we're 100 years in the past and no one lives that long in this world. But I hope to get maybe a few more connecting points than we've gotten so far.
Some of the people who are very old when Game of Thrones starts could be very young by the end of this story.
Yeah, or perhaps like in the previous generation, like during Robert's Rebellion, that kind of thing. So yeah, that's also gonna be interesting.
My hope is that they keep it small, Because when I was doing the recap or recaps for this episode, I loved that it was basically just some hijinks at a tournament. And I know we're not going to do another tournament, I imagine, in the other two. There are 3 published and up to 9 or 12 planned that George R. R. Martin has discussed in interviews. So I imagine he's going to want to keep going with this. And I just want them to stay small because looking forward to the adaptation, which is 2 days from now. I'm incredibly excited for it. One of the reasons I'm excited for it is that George has, in interviews, been incredibly enthusiastic about the writer, working with the writer who just wants to keep it close to the source material after the clusterfuck of House of the Dragon Season 2.
How refreshing.
I'm incredibly, and I feel reassured by that.
I do too.
But the other thing I love is that this season is going to be 6 episodes, and they're like half-hour episodes.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting too.
Half-hour drama hasn't happened in a long time.
No,
but
they don't do that anymore.
I think there's a huge hole in the market for that. Because
I agree.
The thing that I kept hoping for, the second I got into this, really reading it, I basically read it in one day. It was a beautiful marathon. I fell in love with the characters really quickly. I fell in love with the plot really quickly. And I realized towards the end that if they keep this small, and this really is a wandering adventure series with basically 2 characters, in terms of HBO and how this could work as a show that people keep going back to and aging with, I think this really could be the fantasy Mandalorian.
Ooh.
And I'm not talking about what Mando became, but do you remember
how it
in
started.
the first where it was short, it was episodic, it was punchy, it had color and variety and heroism, and it was big guy protects little guy.
Yes, and there weren't too many like larger sweeping plots going on, and that actually started to happen more in season 2, and that I think is where the show suffered.
But the promise of that season 1, I think this could nail that.
I think that's a great comparison, and I hope that that's how we're going to feel with this. I agree, because when I after reading this, I was like, man, how are they going to stretch this over 6 hours? Like, what bullshit fluff are they going to put in there? But now that knowing that they're half an hour, I mean, one episode's like 40 minutes, but whatever.
The pilot.
Like, yeah, sure.
Pilots are usually a little long.
Yeah, so I think this makes total sense, and I really think it's just going to be an opportunity to be true to this story and give, visual color where needed, but I'm really excited for it. Yeah, this was so fun to read, and I'm actually glad that you brought up Dunk as almost this like non-magical, non-fated character, because interestingly there's a little element of prophecy to this story, if I can dive into that for a minute,
please.
I can indulge. So a character that you didn't mention in the recap, which is totally fine, is Daeron. Daeron Targaryen is the older brother of Egg and the shithead Targaryen.
His name is Aerion.
Aerion, yeah. I know you're trying to like simplify names. So Daeron, and it's confusing because the king is also named Daeron, so his grandfather. And I don't think this is Alicent's son, Daeron. I think we're like another generation after that, but it doesn't matter. So Daeron is kind of a drunk. Not kind of, he's a full drunk. And he had been with Egg when they were out, like on the road. And when Dunk first finds Egg, he's come to this tavern to like rest, get some food, and make his way towards the tourney. And Daeron is there. And he's like in the corner, passed out drunk. And Dunk doesn't realize that he's a prince. But when he comes in to the tavern, Daeron says like, I dreamed about you, stay away from me. And so then later on when everything's revealed and he talks to Daeron again, Daeron tells Dunk what the dream was. And I want to talk about the dream because it's really interesting. So he says, I dreamed of you and a dead dragon, you see, a great beast, huge, with wings so large they could cover this meadow. It had fallen on top of you, but you were alive and the dragon was dead. So when you first hear about that dream, Daeron's thinking that he's the dragon because he's a Targaryen. So he thinks that, oh, you're going to lead to my death. So he's like, stay away from me. And then he reveals this dream sort of in the lead up to the trial of the Seven. And so I think Dunk and Daeron kind of interpret that as, oh, you're going to kill Aerion, the shithead. Like you're going to win this battle. But that's not what happens either. What happens instead is that the dragon, the Targaryen who dies, is Baelor, the heir, the good knight, the one who volunteered. And when I think about the dream of the beast, it says, with wings so large, it had fallen on top of you, but you were alive when the dragon was dead. So I interpret that as Baelor protecting Dunk, but then dying in the process. And so I think we can take this dream as a prophetic thing, because Daeron even says, like, I have these special dreams that come true and they're scary. And that reminds me a lot of Helena Targaryen, Alicent's daughter, the crazy one. And so that seems to be like a Targaryen trait of having these prophetic magical dreams. And so Daeron seems to have that. And I think rather than going mad like Helena, he's just turned to alcohol instead, and that's why he's a drunk. So I think we can, from this, put Dunk in the prophetic lane.
Oh, that he is prophesied?
Yes.
Because someone has had a dream about him?
Yes.
I'm a little gun shy about this because having done a year and a half of chapter by chapter Game of Thrones, having watched the whole series, having done the coverage for both seasons of House of the Dragon, I am so used to misapplied prophecies.
Right.
So
yes.
my first, and this one does have some ambiguity to it because we're basically parsing a metaphor. Is it an actual dragon that falls on Dunk, or is it some Targaryen?
Right.
And I think that ambiguity already opens it up, where I don't know what the fuck this means. In that I could argue that it means 20 different things.
Sure.
My first impression of this dream is that it was almost the only moment I felt in this novella where George was franchising these characters. I thought that was a preview of what's to come eventually.
Interesting.
Because I don't know, when I meet a heroic character in a meat and potatoes fantasy story like this, who's really cool and virtuous, I want him to fight a dragon. And I know that can be a Targaryen, but I want him to write a real fucking dragon.
Yeah.
So that was my thing of, maybe we're hyping up, hey, if you like this, I'll write some more, and eventually there'll be a cool dragon on the horizon. It felt like a carrot to be dangled in front of the audience. Or you could say, maybe it is poiling.
Poiling?
That's a brand new word.
That's not a word.
Damn.
Poiling? Pouring.
Maybe it was pouring some cold water on this friendship that was emerging between Dunk and Egg. Maybe they grow up, maybe something comes between them, and then that's the clash with the dragon. Because it almost felt too easy of just, there's a shithead Targaryen who's going to die around him. So I didn't know how to take this.
Sure. Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because the question I was going to ask next was, is this the dream that happened, or has this happened yet? Will this happen again? Will this dream come true again? Because towards the end of the story, we get a hint about like sort of prophecy and fate and what's supposed to happen, because when Dunk is talking to Maekar, Egg's father, Maekar is trying to make peace with how all this went down, and now his brother is dead, and what does this all mean? And but Dunk asks him, he says, mightn't it be that some morrow will come when I'll have need of that foot, the foot that he didn't have to lose for hurting the kid, where the realm will have need of that foot, even more than a prince's life. So Dunk is already thinking of himself as, maybe there's a larger purpose for this. Maybe I'm meant to do something greater. Maybe, this Prince Baelor did have to die, but maybe something else good will come out of that has to do with me. And I don't think that's Dunk saying I'm so important. I think it's more him trying to make sense of everything and hope that he can be a cause for good and not for ill. And so I wonder if this dream is sort of wrapped up in that just a little bit.
I don't know how much of a butterfly effect there's going to be here. I mean, the whole drama of House of the Dragon hinges on a prophecy being misapplied.
Yeah.
Where we pass on the Song of Ice and Fire vision, and that leads to the schism of the blacks and the greens, and it becomes a whole mess. And we see that vision we see that on screen a bit in season 2, and how that changes Daemon's allegiances and realigns him with Rhaenyra. So I don't know if this is even an original prophecy, or if it is ultimate. Like, we're talking about, is it about one of these Targaryens or a real dragon at all? I think we could accordion that out a little bit and wonder if it's really about Dunk. Or if this is ultimately about Egg, if he has some knock-on effect, or if someone else that Dunk, I don't know, protects, saves, or encourages to follow this knightly path, someone else who will be consequential in the future. I don't know how many orders of effects we have to expand out from this one moment in a tavern to understand what it means.
Well, and I think you're right to wonder that, because I think George R. Martin has proved that to be the case with most of his prophecies, where it's not, simple, it's not cut and dry, it's not one and done. It's, well, it means this, but it also means this. And yeah, the stallion that will mount the world is Dany's son, but it's also her nephew, Jon Snow. And then also there's the prince that was promised, but then there's also the other prince that was promised. Like, it's much more complicated than just, here's one prophecy that will come true at some point. It's much more, fractal than that.
I do want to look for kind of the breadcrumbs of this prophecy and how it is presented in the show.
Yeah, me too.
When eventually we get to reading the other Dunk and Egg novellas, I want to see how this manifests, what shadows there are kind of across those other stories.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good one to bookmark, I think, for later.
Yeah, it was exciting to see.
I want to play with some echoes. So maybe it's because we have just jumped completely back into our intense fantasy discussions, but I saw a lot of echoes of Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings and The Witcher and all of our other fantasy stuff within this story. And I think some of those are intentional feints, and I think some of those are just things you and I are seeing the Matrix on. But I wanna play out like 6 of these and just popcorn them and see what you think of them.
Okay, sounds good.
So the first one is that moment when Dunk is imprisoned in the tower cell. He's not allowed to participate now in the second day of the tourney, and he's listening to the jousts and the battles, and he's imagining what's happening, and he's worrying about what's happening. And that reminded me so forcibly of that beautifully written Catelyn chapter in the first Game of Thrones novel, where she listens to Robb's battle.
I thought the exact same thing. I'm so glad you brought that up. I didn't know if that was just me being like super like looking for stuff, or if it was more natural than that. Yeah.
No, I think that's a nod. Or, I mean, maybe it's an incidental nod. I mean, I know this I'm not George R. R. Martin at all. I'm not comparing myself, but I'm saying just being a writer. Sometimes you just end up kind of repeating yourself because the same type of shit interests you.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the things we took away from that Catelyn chapter was it's interesting that we're actually not often, we are in the point of view of the nobility and people in power, but we're not usually in the POV of like the main kings, the main players. We don't get Robb's POV, we don't get Tywin's, we get Tyrion's and Catelyn's, right? And so in this case, we're not getting any of the Targaryens or even like the master of this tourney. We're getting this Hedge Knight who doesn't get to fully participate. And once he's in it, then we get a really excellent POV of, the combat that he's in. But getting these sort of like sideline perspectives, it's something that I think George is really interested in. So I like that came back here.
The second echo that popped up to me here was this burgeoning relationship between Dunk and the lady who works at the puppet stand, whose name is Tansel. And that reminded me of the early non-tragic promise of the relationship between Tyrion and Shay.
I thought the same thing.
And I liked this because it felt like more of a cautionary tale. I think there's a happy ending to this relationship because they go their separate ways.
Yeah, but at the end, he's going to Dorne, which is where she said she was going to.
But do you expect her to actually show up, or do you think that was just a nice gesture at the end of the story?
George is funny. I could see her showing up, but it is ambiguous. You're right. It's not like he's just saying, "Oh, I've got to go find Tansel now." It's more like, Dorne sounds nice. Maybe I hope one day I'll find her or another girl to love me, because they have one conversation. It's not like they have a relationship. So
I could see her showing up or cameoing or something in the future, but I don't know why. I don't really expect her to become another lead of this story like Dunk and Egg were, but I thought that was a really beautiful, sad evoking of Tyrion and Shay.
And there's something interesting about having her be a puppeteer and a puppet maker, because there's an implication of her as like a narrator or a storyteller or someone who is beyond or above the actual story. So she's less of a character and more of a just like a mover of the plot. And I don't mean like she is there as like a device or an object. I mean, like she has a real character and is a person, but she's sort of serving a larger purpose beyond her own individuality. So I like her as a puppeteer. I think that's interesting. So so I could see like her not showing up again.
Right.
Yeah.
The third one is Aerion, the shithead Targaryen, reminded me so much of Joffrey. The lying, the cheating, the stealing, how much of a braggart he is.
And being so like, high temperature angry, because the reason he attacks Tansel is because in her puppet play the dragon dies and he's like, this is treason. It's like, okay, calm down.
But it reminded me specifically of that really tragic interlude in the first Game of Thrones novel between Arya, Sansa, Joffrey by the lake.
Oh yeah, the butcher's boy,
which ends
Micah.
in Lady dying.
Yeah.
So I think that sets you on a really bad path. It reveals like one shithead action by this young I don't know, sort of prince.
Yeah, inbred freak.
Yeah, it reveals his true character and is a dark portent for everything to come.
Yeah.
And I expect the Targaryens to at least loosely be recurring villains, because every Westeros story has a Targaryen as a recurring villain.
Yes.
They almost always turn evil. And I know there'll be some relative who doesn't like the way Dunk is bringing up Egg. There'll be some shithead brother.
Yeah.
There's always going to be another bad apple to fall from the Targaryen
Right. Also,
tree.
Aerion is still alive, so there's also that, and he's
Exactly.
going to be pissed that his uncle's dead.
Right. So he could easily become who's the one with the eye patch from House of the Dragon?
Aemond.
Yeah, he could be our new Aemond, right? He's got this grievance that he can try to avenge going forward.
Right.
The next one, I wanted to just take a look at the central dynamic between our main two characters, Dunk and Egg, because a lot of the marketing when these novellas were repackaged and illustrated and sold as a hardcover together, I remember this, the way they were selling it. It was 100 years before Tyrion Lannister and Podrick Payne, there was Dunk and Egg.
Oh, uh-huh.
And I hate that comparison.
That's such a weird comparison, because neither of those characters have anything to do with these two characters. Other
I don't
than
like that at
they're
all.
a knight and a squire. But Tyrion's not even a knight. He's a prince.
He's a prince. He's
yeah,
a nobleman.
he's a
Dunk
lord.
is
Yeah.
neither of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I don't, and the thing is flipped, right? Because Egg, is actually a nobleman and Podrick is not. So
Right.
I don't like that comparison
That's
at
dumb.
all.
That's just like, hey, remember these characters? That's annoying.
It's a shitty kind of shorthand to market a book, which
Yeah.
I understand the necessity of, but I don't, analytically, I hate it.
It doesn't work, yeah.
I think there's a much closer comparison here between Ciri, or not Ciri, Arya and Jack and Hagar.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Mhm.
Or even Arya and the Hound.
Yes, because Arya is like this, a girl of noble birth.
Yeah.
She's not royal, but she's noble. But she has been like reduced down to this sort of squire role with this more run-of-the-mill, knight, kind of like, scrappy guy. That's interesting.
Big guy, little guy, class differences.
Uh-huh.
Obviously, I just spoiled it, but you can also do Geralt and Ciri
Yes.
in the same way you can do Mando Grogu.
Yeah.
I think there's a
yeah.
lot of that here. And we're going to get more and more into The Witcher as this conversation continues.
Oh, okay, cool.
But to pull it to Lord of the Rings for a second, I was so reminded of the dynamic, the real, I don't know, warmth and humanity between Gandalf and whichever hobbit he's chosen for the adventure. Where there's a real trust.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. And belief in their potential.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Where you
too.
see Frodo and Bilbo blossom and grow and evolve into this really fuller version of themselves. And the whole promise of this story is, hey, do you want to go on some fun adventures and see characters grow?
Yeah.
It felt like that kind of loose episodic journey that Tolkien was so good at.
And like Dunk, Gandalf he's kind to his hobbits, but he's not, overly sweet. And like he gives them a hard time still. He challenges them. He sometimes abandons them. He lets them fight and work out things on their own in the same way that Dunk, every other sentence is threatening to beat Egg, like hit him across the face. He doesn't mean it, but he still says it,
Yeah.
and and he's not very nice to him first. He's like, okay, you better not steal my horses, like, okay, like get up, there's work to do. Like he's not being like, here, sweet little baby angel, let me take care of you. It's, hey, you're going to work for me, and he's building character.
Right.
And he's being kind, but in a way that is still allowing room for Egg to grow. And that's kind of what Gandalf does for his hobbits too. That's cool.
The fifth echo is, there's a little bit, and I want to see if you caught this too, when Prince Baelor is introduced. He's got dark hair.
I know.
A lot of the other ones have the blonde hair. Even Egg, before he shaves his head, he
Yeah.
has that golden blonde, platinum blonde, whatever the fuck hair with the purple eyes. But Prince Baelor doesn't. And people remark on this and say, well, his mother was from Dorne, and maybe he takes after his mother. But every single time we have to talk about hair color and recessive genes in Westeros, it turns into a bloody, brutal succession battle. So what was this? Why was this dropped
I
here?
wondered about that too. I mean, I think it could just be, his mother is from Dorne and brown hair is a dominant gene. So like, maybe he's likely to get that. But at the same time, it is weird. And it always makes people of Westeros question things. So I think even if canonically Baelor is not a bastard, I think there's still something about, like, there's something historically in Westeros where people are going to be suspicious of a royal who looks like this, and therefore it's going to cause problems and stress and tension in the succession.
Especially from the other Targaryens.
And I think the fact that I think in this world, if you're a member of the Targaryen family, if you have brown hair, that's code for you're not as crazy. Because it sounds like Baelor was like nicer,
right.
more level-headed, would probably be a good leader, was going to be a good king. Like and because he's not quite as, I don't know, inbred as some of the
Yes,
other ones.
he's the least inbred Targaryen in this book.
Because his mother is not a Targaryen. She's
Right.
a Dornish princess. So his parents aren't siblings.
And is that a coincidence that he's a better person?
Right, exactly. Right. So I like that as just George's like visual coding of, hey, he's not quite as cuckoo crazy. Like the same with with Rhaenyra's kids, who are bastards from Harwin Strong, whatever the fuck his name is.
Bastards, Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, the last...
Their word, not mine.
The last echo.
Sorry, illegitimate sons.
The last echo I wanted to play with here is that trial of 7 that we talked about during the recap.
This was cool. I loved it.
Something about this... I mean, I know that there are other guys fighting for Dunk, but because we so are rooted in his perspective, we really see this final battle as just this one guy.
Yes.
With these 7 over-equipped monsters running around him on war horses. And because he is a virtuous guy who is a promising, noble young dude who's trying to protect the innocent and do the right thing, and we imagine, given the title of this series, A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, that he has this storied, legendary future in front of him. This felt like his Weathertop moment.
Ah,
and
cool.
When the Kingsguard join this melee, they're even described as being like ghosts.
Because they're all white armor and cloaks.
So what do you make of that?
I think that's great. I like that a lot. Yeah, the ghostly comparison was interesting, and even like the writing was so atmospheric in this moment in the book where it's it's all misty outside. I think the mist was described as coming out like white snakes, snaking over the lawn, and it was very ethereal and ghostly. So I think that's interesting. So because that's Aragorn's big moment of like, I'm here, I'm not fucking around. I'm like, I have this like great heroic power in me where I can literally defeat death, these wraiths, these undead creatures. So I like sort of giving, this almost supernatural power to Dunk. I mean, not quite, because it's not like he takes all these guys out. Like really, the one who takes out the Kingsguard is Baelor, but he's still...
Also, they're sworn not to hurt Baelor.
Right.
They can't hurt anyone in the noble blood. They can just defend themselves.
Right. Yeah. So I did like that a lot, and that helps explain why Dunk is succeeds here. But I like giving him a... Not fully giving him supernatural power, but just hinting at it.
Hinting at something special on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved reducing the Kingsguard, who are so often evil or aspirational, depending on if we're Jaime Lannister, if we're Arya running through the rats and the sewers. Mm-hmm. The Kingsguard are usually these kind of omens.
Yeah.
There was another imagery or metaphor, this idea that we were stuck with through so much of this story, which was even emblazoned on Dunk's shield, that became almost in this climax, it turned into an omen. And that was the shooting star. He thought it was this hopeful image that he was putting on this shield that he just kind of had to pull out of his ass, because they told him when he was trying to register for the tourney, you can't use the old man, your dead mentor, you can't use his shield, that's his shield. You need a new design or
new sigil,
insignia on your shield. So he went over to the pretty lady at the puppet stand and said, hey, can you paint this thing for me? And she said, what do you want on it? And he just
like,
kind of...
I didn't think of that before.
Football? What's a football? So he
funny.
pulled the shooting star out of his ass. And then in the climax of the story, he started seeing that in a different light as the stars falling. Am I falling?
Yeah.
And I loved that insidious kind of twist of imagery. I know you had more to say about the shooting star. Did you catch any of that omen kind of feeling to
Absolutely. The shooting star goes through like several iterations of meaning and significance for Dunk and also for the story. I almost called him Doug. For Dunk and the story. And of course, we've seen this before with the comet that we open A Clash of Kings with. We haven't read A Clash of Kings on the show just yet, but we're familiar and we know how important it was. Yeah, it's in the show too. Yeah, the TV show. But so the shooting star. So yeah, the first time we encounter it is actually even before the shield. It's near the beginning of the story. It's the first night that Dunk has arrived at the tourney. He doesn't have a tent, a pavilion. He doesn't have any fucking money or anything. So he is like camping outside, kind of outside the rest of the tourney camp area, and he's laying down. And he sees a shooting star, and he thinks to himself, "A falling star brings luck to him who sees it. But the rest of them are all in their pavilions by now, staring up at silk instead of sky. So the luck is mine alone." And so at the beginning of the story, Dunk is very optimistic. We see him being this very like hopeful guy who knows what he's up against. He's not dumb, but he knows he's got a challenge, but he feels like, I can do it. I just have to have one victory, and then I'll have enough money and enough collateral to get myself through the rest of everything. I just have to win once, and I think I can do it. And so he's hopeful, and he's trying to make the most of his situation. Yeah, I don't have money to sleep in a tent, but hey, I'm the one who gets to see the lucky star, so like that's pretty cool. But then, yeah, when he gets that shield and it's painted on there and the battle's about to start, he has a totally different view of it. It says, now that Dunk held it in his hands, it seemed all wrong. The star was falling. What sort of sigil was that? Would he fall just as fast? And so the fear is taken over. This is after so much shit has gone down. He's already been imprisoned and dealt with all the stuff with the prince. Like, things are not looking good for him, so he's letting that fear kind of take over. But then once Baelor joins his group, his trial of 7, and the battle's about to begin, he looks at his shield and it says, the sight of his elm tree and shooting star gave him heart. So it becomes a symbol of hope again. And then in the end, actually, the reason that Dunk does not die in this battle, I think, is also because of the shooting star. Because right as he's already been knocked off his horse, he's already been like hit in the head with Arion's like flail.
It's like a mace, right?
Yeah,
one of those, like
one
the
of those
thing that the
morning
Witch
stars.
King has with the ball on the chain and the stick.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So it says, the spiked ball whirled round and round the sky and fell towards his head as fast as a shooting star.
Ooh.
And that's when Dunk finds the strength to get up again and beats the shit out of Daeron. And so it's sort of ultimately, the shooting star is a sign of hope for Dunk, but it's not as simple as, oh, Dunk is this great, heroic, hopeful character who always looks on the bright side and always finds the good and always does the right thing. Like, because that's not the way that George tells stories. It's much more complicated. So even though Dunk is very hopeful at the beginning, you see him struggle with staying hopeful and seeing the good in things and letting fear and self-doubt take over. But eventually, he's able to find that hope again, and that is what ultimately helps him win and prevail in this whole story. I thought it was such an interesting symbol to fall back on.
It's like literally weaponizing imagery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I was interested in that too, because it is such a hopeful symbol and such a hopeful story. And I'm wondering how that really works in this larger story in this world. Like, I'm thinking about, like, can a hopeful hero triumph in Westeros? Can he only triumph at this time period? Could he triumph 100 years from now? Could he triumph 100 years before this, during, like, the Civil War? Like, I don't know.
This is exactly what I was about to talk about.
Incredible.
So I
incredible.
think I want to respond to that, but I kind of want to use it as a segue.
Okay, sure.
Because hope is my big thing here too. And I think it's why I loved this story so much, why I think it is going to do well. I mean, assuming that the creative team sticks to the source material here, I think this is going to, I don't know, hit like a thunderbolt, because I love the cynicism and the darkness and the commentary and all that through Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon. But I think, I don't know, reading this story right now with such cruelty, with such abuses of power rampant from the powerful and the administration, it's been agonizing every day. I think a story that is hopeful, that is virtuous and principled, I think is going to absolutely take fire with people.
I know what you're saying.
My big takeaway from this story is it really felt like the Hedge Knight had more of an emphasis on the idea of moral clarity than Game of Thrones did. Where I think this world, because it's still Westeros, doesn't really matter the time. We've seen it before this in Fire and Blood. We've seen it after this in Song of Ice and Fire. It's an equally cruel world, and the people in it are equally cruel and opportunistic and manipulative. It's still an incredibly corrupt place to be, like our world. But the difference in this story, as opposed to how we know House of the Dragon's going to wrap up because we've read Fire and Blood, and how we assume Game of Thrones is going to wrap up because we've seen the last season of the show, the well-meaning, virtuous, heroic character here wins. And that's the only time that's ever happened in Westeros. Usually, anytime anyone has a little bit of heroism, they are decapitated.
Right.
There are so many heroic decapitations throughout this world. It's not just that they're brutalized or publicly defamed and their reputations are ruined and their kids are scattered to the wind. They're usually decapitated.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And this is so different than that, because not only does Dunk survive, not only does he have comparatively a happily ever after here,
yeah,
but he has a public victory against those corrupt and cruel people. Like, the thesis of this book, and I think of this vision of Westeros, seems to be that line that Dunk screams at the crowd when he's trying to recruit people before the trial. It's literally in all caps. It's the only part of this novella that's in all caps. And it's, are there no true knights among you? And I love this question so much because I've wanted this kind of high fantasy heroism and virtue. I've wanted this so badly in this genre for a while now. And it's not just the question that I like. It's that the answer is yes. There is one, and he's the heir to the throne.
I was gonna say, it can be a Targaryen. It doesn't have to be, a nobody. It doesn't have to be somebody who has no chance, but it is good at heart. But once they get a taste of the world, they won't be anymore.
Right.
It's a person who actually could make a difference and does in this scenario.
There's a level of hope in this story. I'm so glad you framed it like that. There's a level of hope in this story that we never saw in Game of Thrones or House of the Dragon. And I think it's something much closer to the world-weary, grim, ultimately optimistic worldview we get in The Witcher. And if you look at what this story is, it is so similar in scope and ambition to any story in The Witcher. It's a rogue kind of knight and a little companion riding into town, getting into hijinks, and the real monsters turn out to be the humans.
Getting
who
way
are
more
in
involved
power.
than he wanted to be.
The companions can come and go, but I think you can make we just read a prequel for The Witcher with a young Geralt, and it's kind of the same story.
Yeah, these did feel really similar. I mean, not in a way that either felt redundant or, copying or anything like that, but they rang very similarly. Yeah.
And the real monsters being the people instead of actual monsters, this not having a climactic dragon fight, but there's still that constant nod and imagery of the dragon on the helm of the shithead during that final climactic battle. It's so Sapkowski-esque in its, metaphorical misdirection. But beneath all of that is a core goodness within a lead character and the reassurance that even in this cruel, corrupt, shitty world, core goodness can succeed.
Yes.
And I think there are three more kind of hopeful examples I want to
cool.
I want to tag this point with.
Okay.
The first one is how often the mentor figure, who we begin the story with his death and him being buried, he's constantly referred to as the old man, which I'm always going to talk about from the old man, I guess it would be a cliche, from Elizabethan theater, not just in my beloved Dr. Faustus, but throughout Shakespeare as well. Characters are called the old man, and it's not just a nickname, it's a role that they hold in the drama. The old man traditionally is an accurate advisor who gives the hero or tragic figure, whatever, it gives the protagonist really important advice to do the right thing at a turnkey moment, and they're ignored. They are the unheeded, accurate advisor. And I was so expecting that. I so thought this was going to be a cautionary tale moment where maybe the mentor would lead him astray or it would come back to bite him, or there'd be some, there'd be some thorn on the rose there with this old man mentor. And it just doesn't happen. He guides and bolsters Dunk. Even from death, we get constant little, memories of him. We hear lines of dialogue from this guy we never meet as Dunk remembers him. And they always reinforce these good works that Dunk is doing. This feels intentional. I feel like George R. R. Martin, who's incredibly aware of the Plantagenets and all of the European history that he's playing with in A Song of Ice and Fire, I feel like he is dangling this cliche in front of us and pointedly refusing to engage with it.
That is very funny.
He's pivoting away from the traditional old man.
Right, and he did feel like a living, breathing character.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how they're going to do that in the show, right? Because it's all just in Dunk's head. Are we going to do flashbacks? Are we going to get voiceover? But I was so intrigued by how much of a role this mentor had. And I think it was also cool to sort of to open and close your story with the death of a mentor, where, the old man is the one who dies at the beginning, and then Baelor has become a pseudo-mentor for Dunk by the end of the story, and then he dies as well. So I thought that was a nice mirroring as well, even though, Baelor is only 39. That's, I guess, kind of old for their world, but still not as old as the old man was. But yeah, that's interesting.
The next kind of hopeful point here is sort of a counterpoint to most of these Westerosian, is that the right Westerosi?
Sure.
These stories. And it's the idea that all Targaryens are ultimately evil, insane, cursed, corrupt, somehow doomed. I could argue that there are kind of 4 good, normal Targaryens in this story. You have Baelor, he's cool. You have the brother Maekor, who makes this very rational deal to Dunk at the end of the story.
Yeah, sure.
You have Egg,
yeah,
who's
great
one
guy.
of the leads, who's a cute little Charlie Brown, who's a nice boy, who's going to run off and be the squire with this nice guy, and they're going to have fun adventures. And you have his brother,
Daeron. Yeah,
who's not a bad guy. He's just an alcoholic. He's not a bad guy.
And he's kind of hopeless, but he's not a bad person.
And he's part of why Dunk survives, because he's bound to fight on the other side during the trial of 7. But he totally sees that Dunk is right. So he basically says, I'm going to let someone knock me down, and then I'll just play dead possum in the dirt.
Yeah, right. It's
so
great.
I'm gonna try to throw this thing in your favor. That's 4 good and rational Targaryens.
Yeah.
In the rest of these stories, can we compile a list of 4?
Never
even
at the same time.
Even the ones we like.
Yeah, never
are
at the
not
same
good.
time. Yeah.
So I think that's an interesting kind of counterexample, a way George is kind of muddying the things and being incredibly hopeful.
Yeah, sort of being like, yeah, the Targaryens have always been kind of fucked up, but there was a time where it wasn't all terrible. It's interesting.
And again, with this Witcher comparison, as well as this hope, I was so reminded of the climax of Crossroads of Ravens, which we just talked about in a 3-part series, that latest Witcher novel, which is also a prequel and a kind of a simple meat and potatoes fantasy story. That one, I said, had an ending that reminded me of It's a Wonderful Life.
Yes,
where all of these good deeds that Geralt has done through the story, they all come back in his moment of need. Those people that he has helped come back to help him. It's not like he's cashing it in. They do it of their own volition.
Right.
And that happens here, too. When this guy who does good things for people through the whole story, he gets wrongly accused of this crime. He has to stand trial. He doesn't really know anyone. All of these people come back and help him. They rally around this hero and help him survive when they volunteer to fight on his side in the trial of 7. That's incredibly hopeful. We talked about this last time. The It's a Wonderful Life ending is the most life-affirming ending ever written in fiction. So this is two fantasy stories in a row that are supposedly so grim, dark, and evil, being incredibly hopeful and life-affirming.
Because this kind of thing hasn't happened in George's books before.
No, they get beheaded.
Yeah, every time somebody does something for somebody else, there's an ulterior motive. There's something else going on behind the scenes. It's always conniving and scheming and evil and all about self-interest, right? And sometimes it's more complicated than that, but it's never just, hey, I like you did a great thing for me, I'm going to do a good thing for you. That happens like maybe once with one of John's friends, but like otherwise, that's pretty much it. It never happens in this way. Yeah, it's really interesting for him to be exploring this flavor of fantasy within his world. But it's not unbelievable. I don't not believe it. That's the thing. I wonder how long it can sustain itself and when does it all fall apart, but that's what keeps me reading, I guess. So.
But I don't know if this Dunk and Egg series is going to get increasingly bitter and
corrupted.
brutal.
Yeah, like, haha, just kidding. You thought you could be a hero. I don't think George is that mean-spirited.
No, me neither.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if Dunk as a character could exist and succeed in, Ned Stark's Westeros or in Rhaenyra Targaryen's Westeros. I don't know.
Yeah, because he would be challenged in a different way.
Right. And it's also hard to say because in those two stories that we followed, again, we're not following the goings on of people in the lower class. We're only following the nobility.
Right.
I mean, no one in the peasant class is ever having a good time in Westeros, probably. but he's not a peasant, right? Dunk is not a peasant. He's a knight. He's a Hedge knight. I think he could maybe find success or, maybe not happiness, but fulfillment and purpose in either of these worlds, as long as he's not directly involved with the royalty. So maybe it would be okay. Maybe it's just the people in power who are the absolute worst. Yeah. I don't know.
I needed this level of hope in a fantasy story, and I thought it was just incredible. And I want to give a little shout out because we both read this story. Sometimes I listen to them, but I just read this one, and I have to shout out the illustrations throughout this version. If you get the new hardcover Night of the Seven Kingdoms collection with all 3 novellas, the illustrations from Gary Gianni are unbelievable.
It is available in paperback as well if you're a paperback girly like me. But yeah, they're
with the illustrations.
Yes,
and
they're
are
beautiful.
So many of them. They're beautiful. They're so intricate and hatchy and classic.
And again, so perfect for this kind of more classic, slightly more hopeful fantasy story. I mean, the illustrations, the illustrations can be very brutal and grueling as well. They're not just happy, fun, little pretty pictures. But it's wonderful illustrations. And I think that's, when I love fantasy the most is when I feel like a kid again, and the illustrations just added to that flavor of this reading experience. It was so much fun. I loved reading it alongside the illustrations.
I could not have loved this story more.
I know.
I'm so excited for the show, but even if the show doesn't turn out like I want it to, I just really loved this story, and I can't wait to read the other novellas. I think we're going to wait and read the novellas as the seasons come out, so we'll probably hit the next one next year or whenever the next season comes out.
So we'll be fresh for when the season comes out. But
honestly, I kind of want these stories in my back pocket as like a rainy day thing.
I'm
so excited
I just want to feel better.
I'm excited for the show. I loved this story. I'm on cloud 9 right now in fantasy.
I loved returning to fantasy with you. This has been so much fun, and I'm excited to rewatch season 1 of Game of Thrones. It's been forever since I've watched it, and I'm excited to watch it having not just read, but recently read the first book and gone through it very slowly and deeply. And also while watching this new Night of the Seven Kingdoms show, that's going to be interesting.
What if someone wasn't in the mood for fantasy right now?
Well, if you were more in the mood for something like sci-fi or comedy or a slight tinge of horror, may I recommend Lemon Tarts in Space, Cam's latest book. It's a light sci-fi dark comedy. It is Ridley Scott's Alien meets Monty Python. Friday the 13th meets Flubber. It is so much fun. You can read it as a regular novel, which is a really delightful reading experience, or you can check out the fully produced audio drama, which is a really, really fun experience. You can find that audio drama anywhere you can find audiobooks, but the links are in our description of this episode. It is a really, really fun reading experience.
And honestly, to tie this together for a second, we did a 3-part discussion on this channel, on this podcast feed, about the writing, recording, and editing of that story.
Yes, we did. It was fun.
In that discussion, I talk about how this story had a much darker ending as it was outlined and as I was writing it. And the closer I got to the ending, it just felt wrong. And I think ultimately it's probably the most hopeful story I've written too.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, so that you should check out those interviews. They're on the feed. Go check them out. And also do please check out the book. Thank you very much for supporting Cam's work in the show and everything. If you made it this far, congratulations. Thank you so much for listening.
Yeah. So
comment down below and let us know what you thought of the Hedge Knight. What are you excited for the Night of the Seven Kingdoms show? What do you think about hopeful heroic fantasy in mixed in with George R.R. Martin's grim dark world?
What do you make of that dream that Maggie was parsing earlier?
The shooting star.
Right. So we'll be back here every Friday with a new episode, and every other Friday will be fantasy for the foreseeable future.
Yes. So get excited. Put those fantasy helmets back on. Grab your swords or wands or whatever. And thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you here in just a few days with another brand new episode.